without him. He's a best-selling and award-winning author, a columnist for Inc. magazine, a leading keynote speaker, the founder of Praxis.com, and an affiliate at the Center for Effective Organizations at the University of Southern California's Marshall School of Business. Soren is actually from Southern California, although he just moved up to Washington State, I believe. He'll tell us more about that. Business Insider and Thinkers 50 have recognized him as one of the world's top management thought leaders and consultants. Soren has advised and led professional development programs for thousands of executives around the world, including Disney, NBC Universal, Kimberly-Clark, Colgate-Palmolive, Hershey, Red Bull, Medtronic, Roche, Philips, Cisco, Visa. It goes on and on and on, and the American Nurses Association and many others. So today is going to be talking to us about a new way to predict success. And it's experiential intelligence. The initials are XQ. Rather than book smarts, which we all know about as IQ, and then there's the empathetic ability, which we know and know well from our Dr. Steve Stein, the EQ. Experiential intelligence is a measure of how your life experiences have shaped the way you think, what you know, and how you use that knowledge. So we are asking him to join us today from Paris, France. If he was here, if we can put the link on to our Zoom, I think we're Zooming him in. He can see as we all apply. Is he there? Is he coming in? There he is. Soren, we're going to give you a round of applause. Okay, I hope you can. Over to you.
Great. Thank you, Peggy. And great to be with all of you from afar. I've gotten to know a number of you over the years working with Innovators. And when Peggy asked me to do this presentation, I thought about two things. I thought about how I could bring some new thinking to you around this latest book, but I also wanted to anchor it in strategy and innovation, since a lot of you are really focused on that topic. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to demystify and maybe challenge some of our thinking around strategy and innovation, and then share with you how to think about leveraging your own experience, but also that of your teams and your organizations. So in this world we're in, we have known that innovation, strategy, white spaces, blue oceans, we know that they're important. And there's never been more information about these topics. So you'd think we maybe have it right, but it's still hard. Now, one of the things that has typically, we believe, has driven the need for innovation and change is technology. And you can see this chart. It's from Mary Meeker, who's from Silicon Valley, and it's the adoption rates of different technologies over time. And these technologies create whole new markets in the United States. For example, this is the adoption rates in the US, or probably North America, most likely. And you can see that it used to be that disruptive innovations were electricity and the radio and the microwave. Today, it takes a decade to get mass adoption, whereas previously it might take several decades or even a half a century to get mass adoption of different technologies. So why am I showing you this? Well, because these technologies, and you can see them on the right side here, are proliferating, and they're changing the world and changing the kind of things we experience and the things we learn and how fast we learn as well. And so when you look at things that happen out there in the world, I can see the audience. Raise your hand if you ever played this game before. Has anybody ever played this game? I see a hand. Okay, come on. Yeah, okay. So Pokemon Go came out probably 4 or 5 years ago now. And it's based in what's called augmented reality. You hold up your phone like you're looking through your camera, but you see little characters out there and then you interact with them. So, it's a fun little game. Actually, It got a lot of press because it was one of the first augmented reality games out there. But what a lot of people don't know is that in the first year of this being out, 1 billion people played this game, 1 billion. So what that did is it exposed 1 billion people to the power of augmented reality as an experience, as a tool. And so what started to happen then is you started to see companies that were, sorry, I'm going to go back one, companies that are now using augmented reality in more meaningful ways than just gaming. This is a company called Plant Vision that's increasing the yields of crops in greenhouses through using augmented reality analysis. And so what might seem like a fringe technology 1 minute turns into a ubiquitous technology in another, and changes what people are learning about, what we're talking about, what our skills are, what our experiences are around that. So we're seeing this all over the place. Artificial intelligence and ChatGPT these days has all the buzz. Now, I want to put all this in perspective though, because a lot of us have been doing strategy and innovation for a long time. And so what I want to bring to life is the evolution of how we've thought about strategy. And it used to be, if you were around in the 1980s doing, in business, you probably heard of In Search of Excellence and the long-term visions, the big visions. People were talking about how the Japanese had 50-year, 100-year horizons. That's changed today, as you know, but that was really where it was at in the 1980s. In the 1990s, it was all about balancing short and long term. That book, The Innovator's Dilemma, came out. And it was about the fact that we can be running our existing business, and if we don't innovate, we could get disrupted. Or it's also very hard to create the next new business model or disruptive innovation in our existing business. And then you had books like Competing for the Future. All right, so what do you think came out in the 2000s? You see where I'm going with this. So think about what were the defining ideas in the books from the 2000s. What do you think it was? Think about it. It was all about new market space. So internet had come out, and you had this book called The Experience Economy. If you haven't read that book, it's a great one. And you had Blue Ocean Strategy come out. So not only are we now talking about creating experiences as a strategy, but we're also looking at whole new market spaces, blue oceans. And so that was really the defining way we started thinking about strategy and innovation. How do you innovate something that doesn't exist yet, create a whole new market, and innovate the customer consumer experience? Now, the 2010s, what do you think some of the defining books and concepts were there? If you're thinking innovation, you're right on target, because we had the book, The Lean Startup, came out. If you haven't looked at that, it's a defining book for Silicon Valley and how you think about innovation. And then Business Model Generation is another book. So you can see the evolution from big visions to new markets and innovation, and lean startup and business models are really about moving fast. It's almost the opposite of the big vision. So what's the 2020s going to be? Well, you know the title of this presentation, but I'm going to start with something that we all experienced, which was COVID, and lead you into why I'm going to propose that actually strategy has completely changed because of COVID also. So when you think about what happened during COVID, there was a huge disruption, but all of what has happened in the last couple decades, we saw underlying it all: globalization, the rise of the internet. We saw technology disruptions, and now we see a human social disruption happening. And that's leading us to a whole new way to think about strategy and innovation and what's needed to be competitive in today's world. So let's talk about that for a second. I'm going to give you an example. If you have ever eaten, raise your hand if you've eaten at Chili's. Does anybody want to admit you've eaten at Chili's? Oh, okay, more admit it in this room than I usually see. a friend of mine, he's chief operating officer at Chili's. And when COVID hit, basically they were about to go out of business. I mean, they're fast casual, and it's not great food, but it's also not fast food, and it's kind of in this middle zone. Well, instead of go out of business, they decided to create a partnership with DoorDash, and they created a virtual brand called It's Just Wings. Now, they had 1,000 restaurants that were empty, but 1,000 kitchens that were underused. And so what they did is they partnered with DoorDash, and then they started selling for $10 US a whole bunch of wings and fries with ranch dressing, kind of a heart attack on a plate. But overnight, DoorDash had become the go-to place for people who wanted comfort food during COVID. They created a $150 million business overnight. So basically, they saved their whole company, and their stock went up 7 times during 2021. So what they did is they looked at what the experiences people were having, and they created something that leveraged their assets to lean into that. Now, the other thing that happened during COVID is, how many of you have ever had a virtual office visit? Raise your hand. I want to see the room. Virtual office visits, some of you? Okay, a lot of you. I have too. COVID hit. I've done a lot of work in healthcare, and I can't believe how many major healthcare systems in the US, I heard 2 of the biggest basically say, we had been struggling to do telemedicine for over 5 years. We just couldn't get it together. COVID hit, and we did it over a weekend. Okay, what does that tell you? It tells you that it wasn't about the technology being a barrier, wasn't about the business model necessarily being a barrier, even though people said it was. They did it over a weekend. It was a human, the human factor was getting in the way. Lack of collaboration, lack of alignment. It was a human issue that was standing in the way of this kind of an advancement, but COVID pushed that innovation. Okay, here's my punchline. Let's start out with the first thing that just got commoditized. It's strategy. So what do I mean by that? In the 2020s, strategy is a commodity. So here's another example, Tesla. So Tesla changes the game in electric vehicles, and then you have companies that have resisted it, like Porsche, who, if you own a Porsche, you want that beautiful sound, you want a stick shift, you want a combustion engine. Well, in 2018, Porsche said they're never going to go fully electric, or at least with that 911. Well, that was March 2018. In May 2018, they basically are saying we could go all electric. And they're saying by 2030, but it's probably going to be faster than that now. So what you're seeing now, this is the world, this is the automotive industry and the market share of plugins. So Tesla's not even number 1. Everyone's getting into it. So where's the differentiation? That strategy of going electric is now basically commoditized. Now, there are some ways in which you can differentiate within that, but basically that strategy of going electric, everyone's doing it. So if strategy is becoming a commodity and you need to innovate fast, what's the trick to doing so? It's exactly what COVID pushed the healthcare industry to do and a lot of other industries. It's basically getting people to unlock the power of what they have inside of them and how they can work together to get great stuff done. And so there's some secrets to that. And one example I'm going to pull from healthcare again is that one of my clients, a big healthcare system in the US, had a problem. And that problem, they didn't understand. And that problem was that people weren't showing up for their appointments. They didn't know why. And so what their instinct was to essentially start to send out reminders and penalize people, charge them for their appointments, even if they didn't show up. But they weren't hitting the root cause. in order to hit the root cause, you know what they had to do? They actually had to talk to the people that were missing their appointments. They had to understand more deeply those people's experiences in life, not just in their healthcare world. And what they realized, the reason people were missing their appointments is because they couldn't get to the doctor. They literally didn't have transportation. And so what they did is they partnered with Lyft. And they realized it was cheaper to pay for a Lyft there and back than have someone miss an appointment, have a bunch of people standing around. So they had to deeply get into the experiences of those they're serving and working with, their customers, their consumers. And they also realized, you know, if you look at who their audience might be, this woman, whether she has the Lyft app might be a question on her phone, maybe not. What they did is they actually worked with Lyft and created a phone number where you basically just have a Lyft dispatcher like a taxi. And so they're also modifying how they go about what they're doing to connect in to that consumer experience that they need to meet. So you have experience on multiple levels. You need to understand your customers and your consumers. But really, when you talk about experiences, there's another side of the coin, and Peggy mentioned this around innovation and culture. So the other side of consumer experience is your employee experience. And so we all have experiences in life and in business. Those experiences create assumptions about what's good behavior, bad behavior, right behavior, wrong behavior. And then those assumptions guide our behaviors. And then when we do stuff, whether it's in work or in life and the cultures we live in, we do things that other people see because we're all taking cues off of each other, and that creates more experiences for other people, which reinforces assumptions. So we're constantly, as leaders, as you as leaders are creating culture each and every day, and then your teams are reinforcing that. And so if you want to intervene and change your culture, you usually need to do that by creating new experiences. And so when you think about the culture killers for innovation, when you hear these things in your organization over and over, you know that people are having experiences that are going to push away innovation rather than pull it towards your organization. So I won't read all of these, but think about it. If you've heard these in your own organizations, or even if you've said them before, the last one is really one I hear a lot, which is we can't do anything until we have more data, which is it will never have enough data in today's world. And so that's a great example of if you have an organization where you just need so much data in order to make a decision, you're just going to be too slow. And so, you know, listening to the kind of things or seeing the kind of things that happen in your culture really will give you a clue as to what people are experiencing and then what you need to maybe overcome or correct. Now, this is my previous book that Peggy mentioned. And I just wanted to level set here because organizational culture, just to define it, it's those, you know, the norms and values, which are really assumptions that guide behavior. And the innovation culture that we want is a culture where people feel like they can freely think, they can try stuff out, and they're trying to create value no matter what function they're in. And if they're serving someone inside, or whether you're serving a consumer or a customer, you're focused on making stuff better. And that's the essence of an innovation culture. And so what I created in my book that is called The Invisible Advantage is really just a simple model. It's really looking at leadership, structure and process, your metrics, rewards, recognition, people, and technology. And you can look at these things and think about, what do we have here that gets in the way or creates experiences that stifles innovation and limits people? And what can we do to put into place that supports that? And it's really as simple as that. Now, let me give you some examples of how this works. So this is a company in Silicon Valley. It's called Intuit. They're a financial services software company. So you go into their corporate office, and they had this pre-COVID. They still have it post-COVID, and they, excuse me, they also will do this. They have an online version as well. And so they celebrate the innovations that they've seen throughout the year. So using these posters. Now they've given everyone a toolkit. This toolkit's called the Catalyst Toolkit. It's based on a simple model focused on 3 steps. Deep customer empathy, understanding people's experiences and how that impacts them. Go broad to go narrow. Brainstorming a whole bunch of ideas, narrowing it down, and then continuing to filter through those ideas until you have the best ones. And then taking those ideas and doing rapid experiments with customers, sharing the ideas, just sharing the idea as a mock-up, as a prototype, as a PowerPoint, whatever it might be. And then you get more customer empathy. So it's a cycle, and they give this toolkit to every single person in the company. So then what happens is not just product groups who make money get recognized on this wall of fame, but you have human resources getting recognized, because recruiting good talent has been hard in Silicon Valley. And this group did some innovative things by using this toolkit and sharing in this toolkit with students to see how they would use it. And then they would offer the students who would use it really effectively internships, so that then they could bring them in and offer them internships and then hire them. So human resources is seen as an innovative function within the organization. They also ask people to do these, what they call them follow me homes. They follow their customers into their homes and see how they behave. It's not as creepy as it might sound, but really what they're doing is they're getting permission and then seeing the experience of their consumers in their actual environment. It's based on what's called design thinking, and it really is powerful for seeing what works and what doesn't. Now, not everybody can go into a customer's home or an environment, because they do have to coordinate this. So what they do every month is they bring customers inside the company. So they do a panel of customers, they bring them in, and they just sit there waiting for questions about what they do, what their experience in their small businesses are like, or what their experiences with their home finances are like. And any employee can come and ask them questions or share their ideas. They call it office hours. So what they're doing is they're giving all of their employees an experience that brings the customer to them to communicate that innovation starts with the customer. So that's a really powerful tool. And they do this in every one of their offices. Now, here's another example, organization I worked with in the state of Wisconsin, in the middle of Wisconsin, and they make big metal racks, you can see in the bottom left here, for military guns and library shelves that roll and rotate in libraries. So they're very big industrial company. Now you can see at the top right there, they also have a poster. So what is this poster? Well, I was walking through this facility and I saw it, and I realized what they're doing here is they are taking what they do, their product, which is in the Field Museum in Chicago that houses dinosaur bones, and they're communicating to the employees who are in the middle of Wisconsin. I wanted to go to Starbucks one morning, and it was 25 miles away, close of Starbucks. So you can get a feel for how in the middle of nowhere that is. But what they're doing is they're bringing the end result of their product, how they are creating experiences for families, for kids, around learning about dinosaur bones. They're enabling and supporting the Field Museum and all of the education they're doing. And they're bringing that line of sight to this warehouse in the middle of Wisconsin, so that people then have an experience around the value that they're creating in this facility. And so they're one of the market leaders in what they do. You probably never heard of them, Space Saver, but they're really doing a lot to create that ownership and that feeling of connection to experience. Now, this is a media company, KQED. It's public media in the US or in San Francisco. They wanted to create an innovation culture, and what they decided to do is create operating principles for their innovation. Now, it's public media, so it's not about business models and making money. It's about creating, just fast decision making and efficient processes. And so what they wanted to do is they wanted to highlight what's important very explicitly. And now what they're doing is they're recognizing people when they see that in the environment, and they're giving them a worthless reward. I usually think that worthless rewards are actually the most valuable rewards when it comes to reinforcing culture, because there are people who are seen as making strategic decisions or living up to one of these principles get this Q award. The Q is symbolic for their name. And then it sits on their desk and they can talk about it and what they did and how they got it. And it becomes an icon for living up to the principles of what they're doing in their environment. So one of the last examples I'll share, this is NBC Universal. This is they call it the Talent Lab. It's to innovate talent in the company. This is Burbank. Those are the Burbank Hills out there. And what they do in this environment is they give their head of strategy, gives a challenge to a high potential leader group. And then they spend about 4 or 5 months moving through a program. They meet once a month and they in cohorts, and they actually solve the challenge. So challenges like, how do we compete in a digital world where people are subscribing to individual channels, or how do we compete with certain markets? And so they're actually solving real problems through the learning experience, experiential learning. And so this is an example of a team that's going through the business model canvas. So they're innovating people and helping grow people. You also have a lot of companies that are doing things like celebrating failure. Now, they're really not celebrating failure. You've got Tata in India. They have the annual Best Failed Idea Award. It's really not about celebrating failure. Plus, you should probably tell the people who are getting that in advance that they're going to get it. But the idea is that we're learning something. So everything is about reframing trial and error as learning, whether it works or not. Failure isn't even, like, risk-taking and failure to me shouldn't even be in the vernacular. What it really is about fast learning, and that's what we want. And when something doesn't work, it's about learning. So I have a tool that I'll make available to all of you. It's the culture map, and it'll give you a whole bunch of ideas for things you can do and some prompts, and you can literally map out the kind of culture that you have. You could say, here's what we're doing right now, and then here's what we want. And the stuff that you want would be on the right-hand side, a whole bunch of different options that you have for moving the needle on your innovation culture, and thinking about right in that middle, what kind of culture do you want? What's your intent with your innovation? So these are just little tools that I found can be helpful, but I want to zero in on this people side. So I've got probably another 15 minutes, and I'll open it up for any questions you have. But I wanted to zero in on this people, because when you think about what I shared with you, that timeline, we're really in the 2020s here. We're in a time in which we need to collaborate more. We need to understand each other more. We need to work with each other in collaborative ways. And that is true, I think, organizationally, in teams, and even in our communities and society. And so when you think about the people dimension, this is what my latest book's about. Our organizations, our teams, we're all just collections of individual people. We bring our whole selves to work, whether we really know it or not. We're walking in the home office door or the office door with all of our histories. Now, those histories might be getting in our way, or we might have some real assets that are being underutilized. And that's really what I want to highlight, that there's some there's some assets that are being underutilized. So when you think about what percentage of business success is due to intellect, Peggy kind of alluded to this, that there might be other ways to look at it. I think we've had the notion that the smarter you are, the higher your IQ, the more successful you'll be in business and even in our culture, in life. And I don't believe that actually in today's disruptive world where things are changing faster than ever, that's necessarily true. I also want to acknowledge we have emotional intelligence as a concept that was added to IQ 30 or 40 years ago, but success today is more than just being in touch with your own emotions or being able to empathize with other people and being smart. There's other stuff at play, and it's about the experiences that we have that really give us assets that we can leverage and help pull those assets out of other people if we're running organizations and we want an innovation culture. So the whole idea that experience is an asset that can be leveraged in combination comes from the past president of the American Psychological Association. He calls it practical intelligence. He also had coined the term experiential intelligence that I've expanded upon. And so what is that? It's street smarts, essentially. So if you think about what street smarts are, usually it's something that, if you see somebody maybe in your organization or on your team and you think, they might not have the education, but they really know how stuff works. They really get it. Well, what is that? How do you put your arms around what that really is? And so when you think about how street smarts are developed, it's through experience. That's the only real way they're developed. And so what is street smarts then? Let's codify that. Well, it's about the experience, and it's that third leg of the stool that complements IQ and EQ. And so that's this untapped, unappreciated opportunity for all of us to look at what we can leverage. Now, we're already doing it. If you've watched a TED Talk, it's really about listening to people who have had amazing experiences, and you're trying to learn from their experiences. They've got experiential intelligence. TED Talks are all about that. So is SlideShare, downloading a PowerPoint built by someone who really has understood how something has worked because they've lived it. Or these master classes. If you've been on the internet or on social media, you've probably been marketed a master class, but it's the people with deep experience that they're trying to get you to learn from. We recognize experience when we see it, but we don't have a way to really leverage it. Here's a quick example. Santi Ramesh, I have known Santi for a number of years. I've done some work with her. Just named one of the top 40 chief marketing officers in the world. I asked Santi, as my book was coming out a few months ago, I basically said, she's not even in the book. I was just talking to her and I said, what are some of the things you've done in your life, your experience, that helped you become a top 40 CMO? And she said to me, oh, that's easy. I play violin. And I had to understand that better. And I tried to, I asked her, like, how does this relate to being a chief marketing officer? And she said that she had to practice and become really, focused and intensely excellent at something. And as she was playing with other musicians, sometimes she'd have to take the lead, and sometimes she'd really have to pull back and let others take the lead and do what they do, and then find a way to merge back in and support them, and then take the lead again. And she likened running the international business at Hershey and building a team to playing a violin. And she felt that those abilities and the mindsets and the higher order abilities basically really were an asset as she rose in the ranks in Hershey and led marketing. And so that is I think a really great illustration of what experiential intelligence is. So when you think about the things that you gain from your experience, real quick example, how did you learn how to ride a bike? Did you read a manual? Did you use your IQ? You think the smartest people ride bikes fastest, easiest? No, we have to try it. We have to fall down, we have to get up. Eventually we might put on training wheels, might take a training wheel off. When we learn how to ride a bike, we do it through experience. And we have know-how. It's how do you turn the handlebars? How do you brake? That's just basic knowledge and skills. But then you develop abilities. How do you ride defensively in traffic? How do you anticipate potholes and bumps? And then you have, those are higher order abilities. Those are the competencies that you have. Then you have mindsets about it. Is bike riding just about transportation, getting to school? Or is it about adventure? Or is it about socializing with others? So you have mindsets also around that. And so that's the case with most of what we learn. We have the knowledge and skills, the know-how, the higher ordered abilities, and the mindsets. And so when you look at experience as delivering those things, we start to realize that traveling internationally, or having volunteer work, or even doing things in our communities and our families can instill certain assets that tie to success in business that perhaps is going underutilized today. And so when you think about innovation, you want to look for things like these things on the right-hand side and find, people who believe that uncertainty might be an opportunity, or that iteration drives success, trying things out. It's okay to quote unquote fail. It's not even about failure, it's just trying things out in iteration. Now, you don't necessarily get that from your last job title. You perhaps get that through other things, maybe through art, maybe through music. So there are different ways in which to start to codify and understand the assets that people in our organizations have and can bring and contribute. My personal example, I have it in the book. It's right there on in the introduction. And I'll bring this to life just in terms of my own experience. When I was 3 years old, my mother developed a mental illness. And my father was rarely around. He was working multiple jobs, and he was really focused on kind of his spiritual pursuits. And by the time they had a hard time making ends meet, by the time I was 15 years old, we had moved 16 times. So I grew up in an environment with very little structure, a lot of uncertainty. I had to make decisions at the last minute with very little data. I had to live with ambiguity. I had to try to figure out what my environment was like. I learned how to sort of read body language. Well, those are the same things you need when you do startups. They're the same things you need when you do strategy in large organizations and you decipher organizational culture. So the same things it's like the 10,000 hour rule. We got a lot of practice doing those things. The same things that sort of traumatized me actually instilled unique gifts that I leverage today. And we all have those. It's just a matter of how you understand your own experiences and draw them out. So I call it the XQ, as an experiential intelligence, Snapshot. And it's super simple. And I did this with a large Fortune 1000 organization a couple months ago. We brought a team together. And people just listed off their experiences. And then we said, what assets did they deliver to you? And they filled these out. They didn't fill out every row necessarily, but they basically filled it out. And they had a conversation about their gifts, essentially, that they were bringing to the party that they could then leverage to implement their strategy and their innovation. So this is mine. I put a few examples in here since I'll give you the slide set. You can see how it works. But the idea is that, list what your experiences were and then understand yourself and then understand your others in your organization at a more deeper level to then figure out what can we apply to our business strategy? What can we apply to where we're going in the next year? So I'm going to summarize here when we think about experiential intelligence and you are all, leading your organizations, you have an opportunity to drive innovation by pulling people together with those right mindsets and abilities, usually on the front end of the innovation process. You have an opportunity to tap into people's experiences, perhaps on the job or outside the job, to scale best practices that people know how to do. A lot of times you have older workers who have just known how to do things, and you want to capture that before they retire, digitally, ideally, but through other means if you need to as well. Hire outside the box. Look for talent that doesn't necessarily have the job description, or exact skills, job description and skill set from the specific job, but that maybe have some adjacent assets that can then apply to the job. And then you want to discover peak performers by creating experiences like that learning experience from NBC Universal, the high potential learning. You give people experiences that are real, trying to solve problems and address challenges, and you can see who are the peak performers. And then that last one, build mentoring networks. So new people come in the organization, pair them up with someone who's seasoned and create mentor networks. So you're diffusing and infusing those assets, the mindsets, abilities, and know-how across the organization so that you don't have to do formal training necessarily. You're actually informally instilling it as well. So those are some strategies that I would recommend exploring, because the goal in the 2020s is to unlock experience. And so with that, you can get a lot of those tools and templates from the innovation tools like the Intuit, Catalyst Toolkit, and others. That's a QR code. You put your phone over it. You should be able to actually just go right there, or you can just go to that URL and download that other stuff. So with that, I think there's a few minutes left, Peggy. So we might open it up if you want to. I cannot hear you if you were talking.
I'm just opening it up to them, Soren. Thank you so much. I took so much from it. I realized as we were going along that I didn't ask you for permission to record you, but we are recording you. Now, I know that that's proprietary information, but it's just for the Innovators Alliance members and team. Is that okay?
You're welcome to send it out to 2-3 million people.
Oh,
it's up to you.
Okay, we'll do that.
It.
It's on. We're on it. That's an experience, right? Very good. So, questions. Who has a question or a takeaway? Something that you learned, something that you got from that. Come on, I know you do. Who's here? Okay, come on up here, Dundee.
Thanks very much, Soren. My name is Dundee Staunton. I'm a longtime member of the Innovators Alliance. And there was an article in one of our national newspapers yesterday about the productivity gap in Canada. And it was largely attributed to a couple of factors. One being a lack of innovation stemming from limited capital investment and an inability to leverage human skills. And the reference to the human side was, I think, more along the lines that companies weren't able to engage people's skills effectively. But I'm wondering, in the context of your presentation, if you would agree with that, or if it's a case of placing people in the right cultures?
Yeah, that's a great question, Dundee.
Thank you.
So there's some interesting stats, and I'll get to answering your question, but I think there's a larger thing happening in the world, maybe North America, but the world. And these stats are US based, but I think it connects to what you're saying. So the percentage of companies now that require a college degree for an interview, it's gone down from about 60% requiring to about 49% in the last few years. You also have the percentage of people who are in the workforce, entering the workforce, age 18 to 29. In the last 6 years, 79% said a college degree was very important. Today, it's about 45%. Very important. So a lot of people are thinking college isn't important. So I think we're at a place where we really need to, I think, define and understand what we even mean by skills and abilities. Because as you saw, I also have mindsets in there. It's how you think, how you can apply what you know to what you know, because you can be very skilled and very smart, but have a mindset or even be depressed and not apply yourself. So I think we're on the cusp of trying to figure out how to reframe and understand what we even mean by skills, abilities, and mindsets in the workplace. And I also believe that our workplaces have been set up to look at job descriptions and only hire people who have the previous job description. And it's so rigid that we need to step back and recognize that someone who might have been in a completely different industry doing something different has the applicable ability to do this job that we have an opening for. And there's creative ways to reduce risk. So, do something temporary, do an internship. There's various, contract. But the real issue, I think, is the pigeonholing of pigeonholing people into a specific structure, and then also not having language in a way to look at transferable abilities.
Thank you. Sarah.
Soren, thank you. I love the concept. I love the idea. I love that we're getting back to people again. My question for you is that along the same line as Dundee, are you finding in North America this is changing? I mean, I know for us as entrepreneurs, we're able to pivot and change and be able to do this in our own organizations. But we're also dealing with the larger organizations that are very much of the focused mindset that it's all about what's on the job description. You have to fit into the box. And we were just talking about this morning, right? Putting people in, moving people like chess people, not in where they thrive the most. Do you see a change? Honestly?
I don't see a huge change. I see a few pockets. You've got a company called Success Factors in the Bay Area. They do interviewing a completely unique way through a lot more experiential stuff. But a lot of bigger companies are really stuck in the historical mechanistic model. And it's going to be hard for them to shift. And so I think that the opportunity, a lot of you are smaller mid-size organizations. You can move faster. You can be more creative in how you look at people. And so like that, to me, of course, they might be your partners, but it really needs to change. And I think COVID was a disruptor that had a lot of people just reassess the human element in life and also in business. And, I'm trying to make the case with my book that we need to take it to the next level. And I see pockets of it, but there's a lot of work to be done.
Thanks, Soren. Very interesting. So we're seeing all over the place a lot of writing about artificial intelligence and ChatGPT. So why can't someone go to ChatGPT and get their experience out of that, where it's the accumulation of maybe thousands of people's experience? How do we differentiate the people part from the AI part?
Great question. And I've been doing a little writing on this. And a lot of thinking about it, because I've had this question a lot. I mean, we're talking about intelligence, IQ, EQ, and XQ. So my belief is if all of you haven't tried ChatGPT, you need to do so. I have written entire articles on ChatGPT and in 2 minutes with a cleverly crafted question. So with that said, I believe AI will commoditize IQ. So it doesn't matter how smart you are, you read a lot of books. Artificial intelligence will be able to compete with that left side of your brain in a way that no human being will be able to ever compete with, because it's going to be that much more quote unquote intelligent than a human being. And so the IQ part, I think, is going to get commoditized. We're all going to be able to leverage artificial intelligence to complement our intellect. So then what does that leave? Is that based on people's experiences that is tapping into? Maybe. But like I said, when I told you I just wrote an article, I needed to ask questions of ChatGPT to get creative stuff out of it, useful stuff out of it. So whether artificial intelligence will be able to ask itself questions to get useful things out of it, I don't know. But for now, I think human beings can ask questions, can find creative ways in which to use that intellect so that we can solve problems that are meaningful. Like, it's up to us to decide what's meaningful. So what are the questions we're asking? To what end are we asking them? And what are we focused on? There's a guy who, David Cooperrider at a Case Western Reserve University. He's a kind of the father of positive psychology and appreciative inquiry. And he basically says human systems move in the directions of the questions they ask. And so if you're focused on asking a certain question, the energy of your team, of your organization will go in that direction. So I think that there's a creative element that's still going to be important in the world of artificial intelligence. Now, it might change, but I think at least initially, IQ will be commoditized, and it'll be about the questions we ask and how we apply it to what end in terms of what our purpose is and the problems we're trying to solve.
Hi, Soren. My name is John Prydish. I'm involved in the implementation of technology for my clients, ERP specifically. And I guess at the beginning of your presentation, you spoke to adoption. And, my experience has been now that everybody believes ERP is something they just must have, and it's a checkbox item. They all want it in less than 90 days, even though they've spent 30 years developing internal processes and so on. What do you see for the future of, digital transformation? Ultimately, it's about people, process, and technology. But, I know that you've hit on a few of these points, and it's a big point for my clients is how do we help them address or appreciate that new tools are great. They can help you screw up at the speed of light, but you need people to create sustainable processes that tame the technology. What are your thoughts on that topic?
Yeah. So if your organization isn't going digital, and there's a lot of different words you can use for that, digitization, digitalization. It's more than just putting documents in the cloud. I think that the opportunity from an ERP standpoint, ERP systems, I was at Hewlett Packard for a number of years. I ran the internal strategy group at HP and did a lot of change work. Those ERP systems take a long time to implement, and they're not very flexible. I think that the future of technology as an enabler of innovation and social systems is that we need to be able to create digital best practices through workflows and all of the kind of tools that automation, but be able to leverage people's experiences as we're doing so that we've got the best thinkers, we've got the best knowers and the best doers all connecting into how to make that digital environment really work from a process standpoint, but flexibly at the same time. So Peggy mentioned the software company Praxi that I started and that probably a lot of you use. That's sort of what we're trying to do, is create a platform that is digital for one very specific process. But I think from an ERP standpoint, it's about creating digital organizations, and it really is about connecting people. And it's probably tying back to the AI concept, data and people connected together in new and creative ways using workflows. Those would be kind of the mix that I would look at in the future.
Well, Soren, while we would much rather have had you here in person, we're so happy that you were able to join us this evening for you, all the way from Paris. Thank you so much. Great learning. I love that chart. I'm going to complete it. I want to find out about my own experiential intelligence. I'm sure others in the room will. Thank you so much for being here, for providing the books for us. And we just wish you all the best in your journeys and getting this message out. Thank you.
It was a real
Thanks
pleasure.
so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.